Hey again, viewers. Dixie here. Um, Reporting after a disastrous second battle. How frustrating. Um, so I will admit I was a little bit indisposed while the challenge was going on, but that was over so fast. Um, and we ended up losing. We were the worst of the worst of the four. So, yeah, a little bit frustrating, but no use crying over spilt milk. So we move and we go to tribal. That's basically all we can do is just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just some quick thoughts on Altus Plateau winning. Um, Sure. Okay. It's interesting. I wonder who they would have gotten rid of if they went back. So it was a 7-1 vote, and they voted out Cade. Cade voted for DK. So if the unanimous vote and decoy tradition is alive and in full swing, then I guess DK is kind of on the chopping block there. Moving down. Oh, these bitches. Um, to be honest, maybe this is putting a foot in my mouth, but I do generally think that it's best not to be the most dominant tribe in the pre-swap phase, um, especially when there's more than two. It just gives the other tribes the incentive to kind of band together when the deck gets shuffled. And so I'm happy to let these Busted Hooligans go on their little streak. It's interesting because, I mean, there's been a big luck component to the challenges so far. So I don't know. I think this is a strong tribe, but I don't know that they necessarily are truly unbeatable. But I think the bottom line is more that they're a solid group that has not been broken up. So there's this probably outward facing image of a unit, but they also, at least as of right now, they haven't had the opportunity to go to tribal and test any allegiances yet. So, I mean, they can keep winning for all I care. It's better for me in the long run. Would it have been nice to win immunity? Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You always want to be safe, but I'm happy to let somebody else, another team, take the spotlight. And then Kaled, happy for them. They were taking forever with their challenge choices, but yeah, happy for them. I'm not sure what would have happened if they went back to tribal. Sly voted for Aerith at the first tribal that they went to as a unit. And I have a hard time believing that Aerith is actually a viable option here if they go back. I think it would take some sort of coup to get rid of Aerith because I just don't see a universe where Spyro and Ochette think that's a good idea for them, just based on kind of overall vibes. I just can't see them not having a more vested working interest in working with Aerith at this point. So yeah, it's interesting. I would think that it would be Sindel or even Carrie that would go, but at the same time, maybe it makes sense for Spyro and Ochette to kind of distance themselves from the season 4 majority that they have going on. Yeah, and so that left us with this embarrassing streak of 3. Votes are due in approximately 4 hours. And so it's been an interesting day. I'm planning to do another tier list, but just, coming over here, we've got the tribe, the Liurnia group. but there have been some interesting developments. So I think naturally in this group, the ones that have floated to sort of the bottom of the pack have been Laura, Leah, and Vivian for several divergent reasons. I think with Laura, she maybe lacks any sort of real in this group. So Laura and I were obviously in the final three together. We had a somewhat adversarial relationship at points in Mushroom Kingdom. She's kind of got an in with Banjo, but I really honestly think that Banjo is more in with me than with his, I guess it was his Birdo alliance from season 3. I think Banjo and I, if we had started out on a tribe together in season 3, I think we would have made a really great team. And so I think there's a little bit of a sentimental attachment because Banjo and Laura and Zero as kind of a unit went through a lot together in the Mushroom Kingdom with all the craziness that happened there. I don't know, though, especially given that Laura has not kept up with the community since season 3 wrapped. I don't think that there's an inseparable bond. And then I think most people just kind of get the sense that Laura is yapping to yap, maybe. That might sound a little bit harsh because obviously socializing with your tribe is what you're supposed to do. But I do think that there's a little bit of an air of, I don't want to say desperation, but I just get the sense that Laura does not feel secure. And when somebody doesn't feel secure, sometimes they overextend themselves. So she's been very chirpy with me. I think she's been the same way with others, including SV, Sailor Venus, Doom, maybe a bit. Yeah. I think Leah almost has the opposite problem. So Leah is such a competent player, but I think she's got a lot of real life stuff going on right now and has just not been super dialed in. I do think Leah has an in with Sailor V. Sailor V let me know that Leah's really kind of opened up to her personally, and so I think there's a personal relationship being fostered there that maybe gives Leah kind of a heads up in this kind of bottom 3 sort of consideration that we're all going through. I also think the fact that Leah was a big person that organized for the challenge goes a long way. I mean, did it help us in the long run? No, but it was a nice sentiment. I think people appreciated that somebody was willing to take the initiative to make a Google Doc or Google Sheets that we could all work off of and try to strategize on together. So I think that TSL is a competent player. Leah's a competent player. I think that she's really probably done enough to really secure her space here for the round. And then the reverse side of that coin from Laura then kind of left Vivian. Vivian is just such an interesting player because, she's just chaos gremlin energy. She's very unserious in conversations. She's kind of a meme queen. She loves to send gifts. She can be super sneaky. I don't know that she's necessarily the most reliable ally. I think she's kind of a very unpredictable player. I think she's probably just, an acquired taste for some. So I think that for folks that are maybe becoming familiar with her for the first time, it might be a little bit difficult for them to feel like they can foster a strong social foundation with Vivian. Vivian has been one of the most excited people for this season. I try to be really good about avoiding any sort of game talk with folks prior to the season, but Vivian has been somebody repeatedly in my DMs, half joking about how we're basically in a winner's alliance, comparing us to like, Parvati and Sandra, and living that fantasy. And it's cute, it's charming, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not that serious, you know. She's really the kind of player that is fun to play with, but is maybe not the smartest to play with, just because she has honey badger energy, and she's not going to be somebody that you necessarily rely on. That said, I think out of the three that were maybe options for this round, I think I would actually probably have preferred Vivian the most to stay between her, Leah, and Laura. I think, it's not even about who I like the most. Really, for me, it's more about presence. I want it to be an active cast. So, as much as I like TSL and as much empathy as I have for anything personal that she's going through, I'd rather keep around people who are actively, really consistently making that effort with me. And that's not to say that Leah has made no effort with me. She's just left me on red and not gotten back to me far more than anybody else on the tribe. So that would be a reason to get rid of Leah. And then with Laura, I just can't shake the feeling that in the long run, I don't really trust Laura. I think that Doom and I were talking, and Doom brought up a good point, though, that I think Laura is more of the type that can be reasoned with strategically. So that might be a pro. Just to summarize kind of how the round has developed. Last night, Vivian was kind of soft dropping Laura's name. I don't think that it takes a rocket scientist to figure out kind of who's going to be on the chopping block here. And so Vivian was kind of floating it half seriously. And I mean, when you say half seriously, like, it's serious, but you're kind of trying to pretend it's not in case it backfires. But she had mentioned Laura's name to me. She mentioned Laura's name to Celestia, to Doomslayer, and to SV, as far as I know. So, kind of, in my I need my Pinot Grigio at all times face, I went to bed, exchanged pleasantries with Vivian, probably smiled and nodded, didn't agree to vote Laura, but didn't shut it down because, honestly, I'm open. I woke up and was informed by Sailor Venus of, Vivian coming to her with Laura's name, and Sailor wanted to tell Laura. Now, I didn't love that idea, but I also didn't know that it was worth really dissuading her from doing so. I really like Sailor Venus. I think she's a sweet soul. I think she wants to work with the people that she enjoys. I think that she just feels like Laura is somebody that's more salvageable for her than Vivian. So, in my head, I'm like, oh, SB, like, I really wish I could say don't do that, but in the end, I was kind of like, yeah, if you want to, like, whatever, I guess. And so, yeah, Laura got wind and basically has kind of been making the rounds, trying to make sure that it's Vivian that is the one to go and not her. The next person that I talked to this morning was Banjo, and that's kind of where I got the impression that he would rather keep Laura over Vivian. I think it makes sense for Banjo. Vivian came for him and missed in season 3. She was also part of the reason he left in season 5. Banjo's never had an adversarial relationship really with Laura. So I think, splitting hairs. It makes sense that he would come down on that side. Talking to Doom, I thought that he might be more in the let's keep Lara camp, but I think he actually prefers Vivian to stay over Lara or even Leah. And this is kind of just one of those things where I wish I had been able to talk to Doom and even Celestia earlier, but things kind of got moving without them, and now we're sort of in a pickle where, we could probably exert the social capital to keep Vivian and boot Lara or even Leah, but I don't think it's worth spending that effort and potentially, rubbing people the wrong way. So it does seem as though it's kind of solidifying on Viv, although Celestia was kind of the last person on board, or at least briefed on the developments, and she's fine to do it, but I think that Celestia just wants to potentially tell Vivian the truth in this situation, since it's very unlikely that she would be able to acquire the idol between now and the deadline. If it's even possible, I don't know. I'd have to look at the rules. I think Banjo's discovered one part of the imager code, but all of that's to say, I don't even think it's so much the fact that Celeste is also in another All-Stars game with Vivian right now, and it would look kind of bad to lie to her bald-faced in this game while still being in the game with her in Euro. It just, it's mean to lie when you don't have to. So I think she kind of just wants to tell Vivian. And I think Doom is down, and I don't have any problem with it. I think in a perfect world, I think Doom is kind of holding out hope that maybe Vivian will mount a counteroffensive to the push against her and kind of double down and try to rally votes again against Lara. But who's to say? I mean, it could easily backfire on somebody else. But I think it's worth the calculated risk of Vivian having a major meltdown. It's not like she is targeting anybody that I feel super locked in with at this point. So I guess we'll just have to see what happens if and when that happens. It is kind of funny. I was talking to Celeste and just saying that, I think Benny really wants to keep Warren/Vivian over Lara. And apparently he told Celeste, oh, I don't know if it's good for your game in Euro to get rid of Vivian. So just kind of like planting seeds, kind of silly. But I think, oddly enough, Celestia is more on board to get rid of Vivian right now than Doomslayer is. But I don't think there's anybody that's adamantly opposed to getting rid of Vivian. I'm just not opposed to another option if it's Lara or even Leah, who, like I said, I like, but just have not really connected a lot with in this game. Before we get to our rankings, just a couple of alliance updates. I feel really good about Banjo. Had a good conversation with Banjo this morning just about how I think that he and I can be kind of an under the radar duo that folks aren't going to really suspect of being as tight as we are. It was something that we had kind of experimented with in season 3 through a phone connection prior to the merge, but we just wound up on opposite sides of things later on down the stretch. But the fact that we started together this time, I think, is a really exciting opportunity for us. So looking forward to working with him. I am worried that I'm getting myself into a situation where I'm going to have to get blood on my hands sooner rather than later. Apparently, Sailor V is proposing a girls' alliance with Celestia, myself, and Leah, of all people. Like I said, I think that SV just really likes Leah on a human level, so that could get messy fast. I think if Vivian goes tonight, then it's very likely to be Laura next. And probably vice versa, I guess, if it's Laura tonight. But then there's not a lot of room to move after that. And then if SV really pushes a girls' alliance, I think Celeste and I need to be very cognizant about the fact that it's not something that we're going to be able to keep from Doomslayer. He would not be happy if we did. And it's going to be tricky to navigate. So yeah, it's already feeling like the walls are closing in, but hey, I'd rather have options than no options. So I'm feeling okay, but a little claustrophobic with all of the interpersonal relationships that are developing. That said, still gonna keep myself up in S tier because number one, and then Celeste as well. The only drawback with Ty is him being kind of double fisting things with the Euro situation. But yeah, I no notes other than that. Like I'm excited for him to be done with that game so that he can be more dialed in here. But I think that we're similar players. We see things similarly. So I'm locked in with Ty. In terms of boot lists, Celestia, number one for me. Definitely going to keep Banjo in A. But I think that out of SV and Doom and Banjo from the previous A rankings, Banjo is probably my number one. I just think that he and I have good banter and energy and rapport, and he's somebody that I can really work well with. I'm going to skip Doom just a little. I think he's still going to be A tier, but I want to talk about SV first. Love SV. I love Gary. I think complete sweetheart. I do worry that the emotional investment that he has in folks is going to present an issue because I think he wants to be super honest with people, and I get it. I appreciate honesty, but this game at times does require a certain amount of duplicity to pull off moves. And so I don't know how he's going to feel if and when it gets to some hard cuts. I think at this point he would have a pretty tough time cutting Leah, who not only is somebody that is just not dialed in at this point. I think that Leah as a player is actually probably the most competent out of Vivian, Laura, and herself. And so I think personally, Leah has the potential to probably do the most damage out of any of those three if she makes it to a swap. I think she has the best opportunity to integrate. If she dials in, I mean, it's TSL, baby. I mean, she's a threat. So the pragmatic part of me is like, oh, get rid of her. But I mean, the human side of me though, like I'm sad to hear that she's going through a lot, and like I think she's a cool person, and I want her to stick around. So yeah, I just think that it's going to be tricky with Gary and just kind of playing around with a very empathetic player, like an empath. But that said, I adore Gary, and so I'm really glad that he's here. I'm really excited to lock in with SB. And then I'm seriously enjoying Benny in this game. I've heard a couple of things that make me a little bit nervous that he could be placating me. But I don't know. He's talked about kind of rectifying past situations where we didn't get the opportunity to work together. And I would love that. I've heard from well, primarily SV, that he told her apparently that when they both said that they liked me, that it's better to stay on my good side rather than my bad side, which just gives me a little bit of cause for concern about how much of our working relationship is him lulling me into a sense of security so that he can, if he's not the one to snipe me later, set somebody else up to snipe me for him. So I'm aware of that. I also know that he's a very well-meaning person, but I think that I just want to be really careful about not doing anything that rubs him the wrong way, because it could be catastrophic if he feels like he's being disadvantaged by his allies, even if it's not necessarily meant to be a disadvantage. For instance, if that girl's alliance got going, I'd be worried about the ability for it to continue to exist and also have been fully briefed on it. I don't know how great he would feel about Ty and I having that option outside of him. But that said, I've really enjoyed kind of talking strategy with him this round, so very excited for this opportunity. I hate to do it, but I think Vivian's gonna have to be in the C category just because she's probably going home, and I don't know. It is what it is. Part of me feels a little bit apprehensive to let another winner go at this point, but I don't think it's necessarily All Stars 1, everyone's targeting the winners kind of Jenna Lewis situation. I think it's just more of kind of the interpersonal relationships on this tribe. That said, she's a lot of fun. I think it's the boring move to get rid of Vivian, but it unfortunately seems to be the most likely. I guess I'll put Laura and Leah both in C as well, just because I don't want to put them in B, but it feels mean to put them in D. I just feel pros and cons for all of these folks. Laura, I'm remembering the more I talk to her how fun our banter can be. I also know that, there's probably going to be some trust issues there between us based on season 3. I mean, the woman called me a sociopath. It's hard to get beyond that. I mean, tempers run high, but I can't help but wonder, does she have that in the back of her mind, how Dixie lied to her so, quote unquote, easily at points in Mushroom Kingdom? So, yeah. And then Leah, I think I've pretty much covered it. So, yeah, it's looking like a Vivian boot. Ideally, I would, probably want to make it out of this tribe with at least the S's and the A's. But I think, winning from here on out is a goal. And I think that with Laura and Leah, we're more likely to do that. So I do think that if Vivian ends up going, it's probably the smart move, not the fun move. So yeah, that's all I have for today. But thanks for listening. We'll see how tonight goes and if I'm still here tomorrow. Dixie out.